Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Final Exerion, a reimagining of an arcade classic. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Happy Meal and publisher City Connection, Final Exerion released in September of 2023 for the Nintendo Switch. At the time of this recording, it's coming soon for the PC. This title takes the 1983 Jalco classic Exerion and gives it a modern makeover, basically making it this new game. It was only announced a week ago, so this one kind of came out of nowhere, and it was a true surprise for me. I've totally enjoyed my time with it, so I highly encourage you to check this one out. In addition to that, I do feel that the original Exerion is worth having a look at as well, so do be sure to check that game out also. So here we find ourselves at the main menu. So before we dive into the game, just a couple notes on the options. So your difficulty and your stage select are both on the starting screen. You can choose easy, normal, or hard, and then you can select your stages that for any of the ones you've unlocked. There are no continues in the game, so this is how you start a stage that you've gotten to. Starting the game, we're taken to this manga cutscene, and that's one thing I do wish you could skip, I wish there was an option to skip the manga cutscenes after you've initially seen them. There aren't, but pressing the start button will skip them. We do get this little info card telling us how to use the power-ups, but we'll go over that in time. So, right off the bat, I just want to point out just how unique Final Exerion looks in terms of graphics. It uses something very similar to the original's kind of pseudo 3D parallax scrolling to give this neat field of depth. In addition to that, another thing that it borrows from the original Exerion is inertia. So your ship has an inertia to it where you'll be moving slower when you initially start moving, but once you've hit like the full distance of your turn, you can go much faster. However, unlike the original, they've added some additional movement options. We have the ability to boost with your triggers, and those will throw boosts in the direction that you're going. In addition to being able to more rapidly move you away from incoming bullets, if you happen to have enemies that are around you, those enemies will be damaged by that boost as well, something to keep in mind. Now, our weapons. We always have our dual shot, but in addition to our dual shot, we have what's called a cell shot. The cell shot is represented next to our life counter in the bottom left there. It has ammunition associated to it, so keep that in mind as you're using it. However, there's some really neat elements to that. On the right side, we have a cell meter here, and that's the important thing. So our current special weapon, basically the cell, we can purge. Once it's purged, if we have a meter that's full, then we can request, and there's this brief wait time that is random, and then we get this counter. 3, 2, 1, and I love that effect. So we're momentarily invulnerable once that barrage shows up, and then we get a new cell, basically a new special weapon. In this case, we went from the energy to this powerful nail, which will deal damage directly to the enemy. If we wanted to, we could go and purge that, which, depending on which difficulty setting you are, that'll have a different energy amount, and we can request a new cell, which will once again bring this barrage, make us temporarily invulnerable, and give us an additional weapon. So in this case, we had the nail, now we have the energy. However, I took a shot from the enemy there, and your cell also acts as armor. So basically, if you have a special weapon, it will defend you from a certain amount of damage, or rather just one hit. And if you happen to get hit when you don't have a cell, that's where you lose a life. And one thing to note, this game does not continue you on the spot, rather it has checkpoints. For the most part, throughout most of the game, the checkpoints are at the very beginning of the stage, and then the boss if you've reached the boss. With the first stage boss completed, we have a little bit of an exit and more manga cutscenes. So the manga is decently drawn. I do like the art that's represented here, but once again, I wish you could just skip it by default with an option in settings. So on the right, we can see the different kind of cell special weapons that we can potentially have equipped on the ship. The ones that I really like, the X is a really powerful homing missile. The R is basically this nice spread shot. And then the Nail also provides some really great offense. So starting in the second stage, you can kind of see how the inertia can be a bit problematic for some of these enemies. Those triangle shots can be tricky to dodge if there's enough of them on stage. And the ship does have a decently large hitbox. It's one thing I kind of have a little bit of a problem with. Sometimes I think I'll have dodged a shot only to like either lose my cell or lose a life and have to continue further back. So one thing to note between like difficulty settings, if you purge your cell unit on easy, it will completely fill the bar regardless of where it's at. However, on normal and hard, it only fills the bar about 70%. So that is something that I recommend keeping track of if you're playing on harder difficulty settings. In addition, you do get a slight refill on those difficulties when you lose it taking a hit from an enemy, whereas it does go and fill it on easy. So those are some of the ways that easy does make the game a lot simpler. And those are basically the systems that we have present here in Final Exerion. I really like, not the biggest fan of the motion elements that we've got in our controls, but adding the boost is, I think, a great way to mitigate some of that inertia problems that were present in the original game. And introducing this awesome like cell mechanic, which we've got these special weapons that also can act as like a timed bomb, although you do have that random element before like the countdown actually starts, is super interesting. If that countdown, or if that random element didn't exist, then it would be super strategic as far as like the timing. You could always count on using those 3 seconds to act as like a bomb for the enemy, but where there's that random element, you can't actually count on that. And I kind of appreciate that element of difficulty that's added into it. So this time we get the X. Awesome, I was hoping for that. So this is the homing missile that is like so powerful in the game. Unlike a lot of other homing missiles, it actually leaves behind a plasma halo that deals additional damage to the enemy like after it initially explodes. Hugely powerful. So as far as the minus flavors are concerned, I'm generally like not a fan of checkpoints, so I'm going to go and throw that one down as a minus, although the way that Final Exerion handles the checkpoints I feel is reasonable. The stages themselves are relatively short, so having to master going through the stages without losing life is fair, same with the bosses. And then we've got also the issue of a slightly larger hitbox, sometimes being surprised that you've taken damage, especially given how floaty the movement in this game is. And that's something that's kind of so-so on me, is the movement, but I do recognize that it's basically taking away from the original game itself. On the plus side, I love the visual effects that they're going for here, taking like that kind of like scrolling like parallax idea and implementing it with a more modern engine, so we still have kind of the feel of the original game itself, but with a whole new perspective. And then the cell system itself is really my favorite part of the game. We're having all these like special weapons, being able to switch between them in a unique way where you purge the one and then summon like another one. You've got that like period of time where you're waiting. It's like, come on, I need this special weapon. That whole feeling is great. This explosion effect when you do get the special weapon. And then getting the object and just being like, no, I'm gonna request something new. The object basically acts as options or gun pods that you can set out on the field that will deal damage. Well, they'll continually fire forward but it's not very powerful or effective, so generally when I get those I choose to just purge them and go for a new special weapon as quickly as I can. So this boss is actually pretty awesome. We're like dealing damage to it in several phases, and well, with that and this boss fight, this basically brings us to the end of our video for today. And there you have it. Final Exerion served up for your enjoyment. This one truly has a great taste. It came out as a surprise. I was not expecting this one, and really, I feel like City Connection has really delivered on this one. The game does a wonderful job of capturing what made the original Exerion unique, while delivering this new experience that I feel manages to come across as unique, even in today's crowded shoot 'em up market. So with that said, definitely a solid recommend from the chef. Alright, that'll just bring us to the end of this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful week, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.